Welcome to the OFCCP Institute's webinar on the LGBT regulations that were published on the Federal Register December 5th. We're going to spend some time talking about those regulations. Before we do that, wanted to give you an update on what's happening here at the Institute. Number one, we have a complimentary webinar on December 17th. That advertisement went out, and you can sign up for that. We will be going over fiscal year 2014 OFCCP enforcement statistics. We just received via our FOIA request all of the conciliation agreements for the compensation cases. There are some really interesting trends in those conciliation agreements. We'll be summarizing that, presenting that, and sharing that during our call, as well as information on some of the steering cases, the typical failure to hire cases as well. So join us on the 17th on our webinar. In addition to that, February 25th and 26th, we will be in San Francisco for our two-day seminar with our faculty, and we'll be covering a broad number of topics as it relates to OFCCP, the new regs, probably talking about the equal pay report. It may or may not be out by then, enforcement, and some other things. Lastly, talk about membership. We recently announced that in 2015, the OFCCP Institute will be a membership organization. You can check out our website for more specifics on that. There's a brochure on there that talks about the services, things like an annual roundtable discussion with our co-chairs. There's going to be a library, an e-library you'll get access to, and a host of other information. Before we get started today, once again, I'm David Cohen from the OFCCP Institute and also DCI Consulting Group, joined today with my colleague David Fortney, co-chair of the Institute, and also with Fortney Scott. So let's talk about the LGBT regulations that are now released. David, what do we have?
Sure. Let's talk about that for a couple minutes. The regs are out there, although we've had a lot of concern about the breadth of the regs, what might be included. I think we can breathe a sigh of relief. The regulations are fairly low burden. They allow, for example, the current EEO clause, if you use the standard EEO clause in your job advertisements and other statements on your website, that will be sufficient. It does not need to be amended. If you simply have an equal opportunity employer, you can continue to use that. That's good news for contractors. With respect to, it has a flow down clause requirement, of course, so it amends the flow down clause requirements. The new flow down clauses would be applied to new contracts entered after these regulations become effective. So, Dave, as you noted, the regs are to be published December 5. They become effective 120 days thereafter. So we've counted the calendar, and it's April 5th. Is that right, Dave?
Yeah, or April 4th, I think.
4th, I'm sorry, April 4th. April 4th. So what that means is that for new contracts entered on or after that date, then you would have to include the flow down clauses. So you don't have to immediately revise your purchase orders. You can do that in sequence. Basically, think of that as a second quarter 2015 task that you'll need to do as you get new contracts in.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, right? Because there as part of the executive order, there were really two parts. There was the affirmative action part. And David, I think as you were saying, that's what the concern was. Was that going to include data collection, data analytics, placement goals? And now we have the answer. It's not. And I think what OFCCP said in the preamble to the regulation is that the affirmative action requirement can be fulfilled by the non-discrimination clause. So there are no outreach and recruitment things like that. The other thing that they did say, David, on the FAQ is that although self-identification and the collection of data is not required, it's not prohibited.
So well, it's not prohibited, which is an interesting point because, and I give the OFC credit on this, they at least acknowledge that under some other laws, state laws, local laws, it may be unlawful to ask for that data. So although OFCCP has said it is permitted, A, it's not required, B, they have flagged the issue, it may be unlawful under other laws. You need to check and confirm that, because simply doing it because it's permitted by OFCCP will not be a defense if it's otherwise prohibited by other state laws. So I think that's kind of a trap for the unwary. You could have a well-intended contractor collecting the data and inadvertently violating a legal requirement.
Yeah. So as you said, in terms of the requirement and the burden on contractors, it is minimal. I mean, I see it more as a copy and paste where
Right.
you're going to add, gender identity and sexual orientation into your policies and procedures. I think that probably the more significant impact of the regulation is really the non-discrimination piece.
Correct.
In that, now you have under an executive order codified into a regulation, acting as a law that if you work for a federal contractor and you are discriminated based on your LGBT status, you now can file a complaint with OFCCP. So, and David, tell me if you feel differently. I see this more as a complaint and a non-discrimination regulation, not really an affirmative action regulation.
Right. I think it may play out like that. The one thing that I think, and I was pleased to see this, Dave, going back to your point on the affirmative action, so specifically, one of the questions that many contractors had was on their application form, would they be required now to ask applicants their LGBT status? And the answer is no, you are not required. So LGBT is now treated just like religion is under the executive order. Yep. You can't discriminate on that basis, but you don't have to collect the information, do a utilization analysis, all those additional steps that we do with race, gender, and other protected categories.
So last question for you, David. As you said, these regs kick in and become effective around April 4th. Is there anything that would prevent someone from just updating their policy statements now? Is there any reason not to do that?
I don't think so. I think that many well-counseled contractors in the first quarter of the year, the beginning of the year, are updating those policies, bulletin board notices, purchase order statements, and I might add, many are doing that in the context of the 503 and veterans regulations that many contractors are now implementing the beginning of January. So this would allow, for an efficiency purpose, if you wanted to do it all at one bite, you could do so, although not compelled to do so.
Yeah.
But I don't see any downside to doing that.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing already that a lot of contractors, and I read something today, I can't remember the percentage, but a large percentage of the top 50 largest federal contractors have already included LGBT voluntarily as a protected class.
Right. I was going to say many contractors had gone there either voluntarily or because state or local laws had those requirements already in some jurisdictions.
Excellent.
So I think all things considered, this is something that contractors should be able. This is very manageable. Yeah. It belongs on the list. It belongs on our compliance list. But we don't want to lose sight of some of the other more significant challenges we face. 503, vets, the new compensation-related developments being the primary ones.
Yeah, and this is something that we'll be talking about in San Francisco. We'll have the new sex discrimination guidelines, the proposed regulations on that.
And those are going to be quite material.
Yeah, and I think some of the non-discrimination on LGBT will also be included in the sex discrimination guidelines as well. So,
I think this next year the agency will make a point, and there will be complaints. There will be bases that the agency can bring some actions under these LGBT requirements to demonstrate that there is commitment to enforcing them, and I think there definitely will be.
Yep. Excellent.
All right. One thing I just want to underscore, Cohen, you mentioned at the beginning on our webinar coming up December 17.
Yep.
Folks, this is information that has not yet been out there in the public. It's very interesting information. This is the best indicator of what we can expect, particularly with respect to the compensation information. And Dave, you and your team done a great job in pulling that information together, and this is a very interesting webinar. So I would encourage you to join that.
Yeah, and like you said, David, I mean, we're going through these conciliation agreement. There is stuff in there that is definitely new. We're seeing Directive 307 being implemented, and we'll certainly share that information. So
I think we can begin to answer what is a pay analysis group.
Yeah, we can absolutely talk about that. So once again, December 17th, and you can sign up for that through our website. Join us in San Francisco in February. And if you are, once again, interested in membership, check out our website. There's a great brochure on there. Download that and look at all of our services.
And let me just give the website, the OFCCPinstitute.org. Okay?
Excellent. David, as always, thanks so much.
See ya.
Take care, everyone.